Welcome to the first in a series of Kildrummy CostCasts. The first in these series, we're going to be discussing how spreadsheets can cause risk when introduced onto projects in terms of managing cost and cost management for capital projects, turnaround projects, and shutdowns. In today's session, we're going to be talking about how spreadsheets are often deployed to do the professional job of cost management on our projects, and some of the challenges that the users can face in trying to use spreadsheets for cost control. Now, we here at Kildrummy, we're not saying that spreadsheets are completely useless. They absolutely have a very perfect place and perfect usage for some of these ad hoc tasks or calculating up columns of data. Very useful for that. But when we try to deploy them in something like a project control environment, there needs to be better control of how the spreadsheet is actually built, how it is deployed into the project, and how it is then used by the end users to create the outputs that we need at the end of the week or the end of the month to report on a cost control basis the performance of the project. So when we come to use spreadsheets potentially on our capital projects or our shutdown and turnaround and outage projects, we find that it could be, in certain circumstances, lacking in certain areas where project controls really does need a lot of strength in terms of how the solution supports the processes. Some of those we can see here. So commonality. Are we recreating different spreadsheets on different projects? Consistency. Are we producing consistent outputs and deliverables that are therefore trusted and used as real key documents by the management team in making their decisions? Scalability. When we think about the volumes of data on projects, it's huge. So is the spreadsheet really the most accurate way of managing that? Perhaps not. Security is one of probably the most important ones. Spreadsheets are frighteningly insecure in the ability that we can simply put them on a USB stick, we can email them to our friends and colleagues, we can then make manipulations to those spreadsheets, send them back, there's no audit trail. All of those things are bringing risk into what is really a key document that's managing the performance of our project. And the final one, improvability. We want to be able to learn what things we did well from one project to the next, and also, perhaps more importantly, we want to learn the things that we didn't do so well. So if we have common approaches into how we're collecting this cost management data, we can benchmark them against each other. We can't do that if we don't have a very common spreadsheet that's producing very consistent outputs. And in my cases that I've been involved in, every project really does look to reuse and reinvent the wheel when it comes to setting up Project B's brand new spreadsheet. So having briefly looked at some of those risk points that we see on the outside here, what I'd like to do now is to actually drill into those in a little bit more detail in order that we can understand a little bit further what really is the risk that we're introducing to the project in using spreadsheets rather than a professional cost management system. Let's start with commonality. So when we're creating these spreadsheets, one of the real powers of Excel is the fact that it is flexible. You have the freedom to do pretty much anything you want. You can create your own macros and complicated embedded calculations, pivot tables, etc. All of that is really good if we're only operating in a one project environment. But really, these projects that we're working on, in many cases, get repeated. Slightly different maybe, slightly different scopes of work, but the core of the actual project itself may be slightly similar. So we really do need to look at measuring apples and apples when we come to comparisons for things like benchmarks at the end of the project. So we need a consistent design in the spreadsheets. We need that people can use those spreadsheets in a consistent way. And we also need a management decision to say which pieces of this information is owned by who and how are they going to update it in the system, making sure that it's in a role-based environment within a workflow. So versions is one of the key ones. I've created V0, the great spreadsheet, lots of calculations, some great reports embedded in there, and I pass that over to one of my colleagues just for his review. He makes a review of the spreadsheet, makes a few tweaks, we now have version 1. But he's then passed it on to 2 of his colleagues, and both of those ladies have now looked at it and changed some other things, changed some of the embedded calculations, and then sends it back to the colleague that I'd sent it to. Now we have 3 versions, and so it can continue. And then what happens as we're moving further and further and closer to actually producing a report, we have this risk of which is the right template, which is the one that's the most up to date, which is the one that has the correct macros, etc. In addition to that, what we have, because we have this inherent freedom within Excel and within other spreadsheet systems, we can demonstrate and make our own calculations that do very complex things. However, they can also be somewhat of a headache when it comes to actually debugging those calculations when they start to go wrong. The typical checksum errors that you can see on the screen here. So we need to get away from that, because often what we find, these spreadsheets is one person's baby. It's the whole, they've designed this from cradle to grave to work for the entire project. So they may be very protective over the spreadsheet, and it may take time for them to actually debug where this calculation error is coming from. And the other thing that I find is spreadsheets contain so much data because they're trying to have everything inside them. So when we come to actually update through the days and weeks of the project in the project controls environment, you're looking at a spreadsheet that potentially has all of the data on that spreadsheet. Well, maybe I only really want to do commitment updates. So I want to just go to a specific part of the workflow and just update the commitments, and be confident that the manner in which I'm doing that is going to the correct commitments, the correct allocations, and all within my user role and my security access. So I can't update somebody else's commitments if they're specifically the role-based owner of that document. So very much having focus, but controlled focus, so that we can get our jobs done faster. So how can we do that? How can we have such a standardized approach? Well, using Kildrummy Cost Management software, what we have is we have a relational database. So it's not a spreadsheet. So this can handle the multiple linkages of how the data comes together. More importantly, it's workflow focused. So it allows the users to follow a workflow, follow a work process based around their role in order for them to execute work within the system. And that work that they will do within the system is controlled via the security, which we'll come to a little bit later on. And that security is what allows us to control who sees what information when, and when they can update it, and obviously it keeps a full audit trail of that stuff happening. Kildrummy Cost Management delivers commonality by a common user interface that is driven around the workflow associated with the task the user is looking to deliver, and also the input screens common to that user's role. I can simply select a specific workflow and input regime, and that will take me to the correct screens. So I don't have to worry that I'm updating in the wrong place or potentially updating an incorrect line item in a spreadsheet. I can simply go to my input screens, and in the example we have here, we're going to update a commitment. I open the specific screen for updating commitments and simply select which commitment I'm interested in updating. Once selected the applicable master agreement, I can apply my filter and then see straight away the commitments associated with that master agreement. Once I click on my commitment, immediately in one place I can see all of the measures and data associated with my commitment. In this example we have actuals, earned values, progress, and value of work done. This is a consistent approach to updating, and that could be the same for updating budgets, forecasts, progress, etc. All the same across all of my projects, allowing me to move from project to project as a cost engineer and operate in a very common environment. So having looked at commonality and how Kildrummy Cost Management addresses that, as opposed to the infinite flexibility of a spreadsheet and the inherent risks therefore in ensuring that we're inputting in the correct way, in a consistent way, etc. The next in the series we will be looking at is continuity. Continuity allows us to ensure that what we are doing will be consistent across the project, but also between multiple projects, and ensure that the delivery of the information that we provide is continuous, understood, and consistent. Thank you very much for joining the first in this Kildrummy CostCast, and we look forward to you joining us in the next session. Thank you very much.